Good morning, this is Jeff at Sewer Tech Northwest. We are at 6104 North Kirby Avenue here in Portland, located down in the basement. I describe everything as if you're standing in the street facing the front door. Finding the clean out, you walk right down the basement stairs. Straight in front of that's a clean out. 4-inch cast iron. Checking the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Waters are running. We are zeroed out. Off we go. All right, going into an area of some standing water here, just before the transition. And it looks like that almost looks like roots there. Yeah, those are roots. Coming to the transition joint. Now we're into 6-inch clay pipe. That joint's blown. And at this juncture in this pipe's existence, this is not weird to see. This pipe's extremely old, the pipe groute's worn out. That stuff protruding off the joint. And right now my camera is upside down, if you didn't figure that out already. That's all dirt seeping through the pipe joints there. Same thing there. And you can see how this joint here, it's not massive, but you can see it. The joint has shifted. And what happens over time, the concern when your joints get like this, in the immediate, not affecting flow, but what occurs is that causes hydro erosion. It sucks all the dirt out from underneath the pipe and over top. It's called hydro erosion. It causes progressive settling to both the sewer pipe itself. It can also cause settling to the ground above the pipe, cause sidewalks to settle. You know, the nightmare scenario, which generally doesn't happen, but it can, is sinkholes. Most sinkholes out there are often created by pipes that are eroding dirt away from them. So anyway, that's kind of worst case scenario. Generally that's not what we see, but that's kind of the full gamut of what can happen. Anyway, we've hit the main here at 58 feet. We're going to do some locating to verify where everything is at. Alrighty, I'm locating the camera head. I'm picking up on the signal just fine. There is a vehicle parked over top where I'm at. So kind of guesstimating at the angle I'm locating at and everything. The line looks like it terminates about maybe 3 feet or so off the curb. The main lateral is situated pretty darn close to the street curb in this circumstance. Almost looks like some roots got through. They did some amount of epoxy lining in here. This is clay pipe. You can see the difference. In fact, this is probably right where the face of the curb is right here. Once you hit face of curb in Portland, city takes responsibility. So it looks like the city updated. So we're probably closer to like 4 to 5 feet off the street curb where the main is at, but they lined their section of the sewer line. And what I was going to actually suggest, this right here I think is actually the secondary access point. You'll see a big steel plate out near the curb. It says sewer CO, something like that on top of it. That's where they gained access. They installed that so they could shoot a liner into the pipe under the road. There's also what I was going to suggest here. It's kind of a small miracle that most of this line has not settled. And it will do it at some point. The line it'll slowly but surely start doing that. You can see evidence of it in some of these spots where the joints are starting to drop. You let that process take place for too long, the line will become wonky, get offset joints, bellies, things like that, and you lose the ability to either do a liner if it gets too far gone, and or you're not going to get a very good result out of it. If you line this clay pipe right now, it would come out beautiful. It would look perfect. You have essentially perfect slope and grade through there right now. Looks like you got some cracks or fractures at the top of the pipe. Those lines running across what right now is the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, the clay. Those are cracks where roots are growing through them. When we first ran through here, I think this area, there's about an inch of water, actually. Just for a moment though, once it drains off, most of the standing water here is hovering around the ½ inch mark. But I'm kind of looking at this thing in its totality. If you're going to go through the effort of repairing the line, you know, the clay pipe you could do by epoxy liner, but on these older houses like this, I don't generally recommend you piecemeal things out and spot repair individual parts of the line. On a line that's, you know, the cast iron, you can see the wear and tear in the flow line. It's pitting, it's starting to channel. You know, it's not completely gone, but that's settling up there at the end of the cast iron. It could be related to bad installation. It could also be that the joints there and or the bottom of the pipe is opened up to the ground to some extent and is causing hydro erosion and causes the pipe to settle. So anyway, I'm going to start here. I'm going to at least locate this point. Alrighty, and the line here runs essentially straight from the clean out to the main. Stays on that trajectory. You can kind of eyeball where things are at based on where the clean out is. The line pops out of the front of the house. This is as you face the home from the street. About 5 feet in from the front left corner of the home. And then just essentially runs straight from there. Right here I'm getting about 7 feet deep. I'm going to push out a little bit. So what I was going to say here a moment ago, the only reason you'd have to consult a liner company, as this cast iron section here sits, there's very little buildup in it. You know, as it sits right now, you know, even with the rougher conditions that are in there, that's one of those locations that by and large is going to act up on you when abusive items go down the line and or big giant balls of toilet paper. So with these newer UV light cure systems, you can often epoxy line areas with standing water now. In this circumstance, you will certainly be improving things. You're going to be taking a pipe right now that's very, very rough textured, coupled with standing water, and turning the pipe walls to as smooth as glass. So it makes that standing water much less significant. It won't eliminate the standing water. It will reduce some of it because the liner will displace some of the water. It might take 1 inch of water down to more like 3/4 of an inch. So you will certainly be improving things quite a bit by doing that. But you still are going to have standing water that still poses the risk for blocking. At that point, for the most part, what you'd be, about the only way I can foresee that blocking in 4-inch pipe that's got a liner inside of it with barely 1 inch of water is under an abusive situation. Like you've got a bunch of kids in the house flushing giant stuff down the line, stuff like that. So it's still something to be aware of and concerned about. Ideally, you dig that section up there and regrade it so the line is properly sloped and flowing. But for some reason you couldn't, you know, get that kind of repair done or afford it or something of that nature, as long as the epoxy can cure in it, you will certainly be improving the line quite a bit, but you're not going to be correcting the sloping grade there. So I would put that as kind of the second option behind digging and or a combination of digging and lining. There's a fair amount of people that will do that depending on how efficient they are. Some will dig up, regrade a piece of pipe, and then shoot a liner through that open trench through the rest of the line and do it in 2 different repair styles. As long as it shakes out to where the cost makes sense to do that way, that is an option. You know, some folks can just dig this whole thing up cheaper than they can do that. So I would price it out, see which makes the most sense. Ideally, I'd like to see the line graded properly. I just wanted to throw that out there. That is an option. It's not going to be the end of the world, but it's not ideal. And you may end up having to deal with some kind of headache when you go to sell the home, you know, getting someone freaking out over a belly or something like that. So from that standpoint, ideally, I'd like to see it regraded. All right, similar depth here. We're sitting about 5 feet from the curb. I put a little marking in the sidewalk area. That should last better than in the grass, in the event the grass grows and gets cut or rain falls. So you can eyeball it from there, the trajectory of the line. I'm going to mark this out to where you can do bids on it. The repair guys may have to do their own set of locates. But about 6 foot 8 inches deep there, just shy of the curb. I was getting very similar depth to that. I was getting between 6 foot 10 inches and 7 feet deep at the start of the belly. And that belly where the belly starts at was probably about 10 feet out from the front of the home. I'm going to pull back here just behind the belly. There's a part of this I will have a hard time locating just because of the tree to the front of the home. I'll see if I can get a depth here. You can see that the line does dive down pretty darn good here. I'm hoping I can get a locate at the top of this before it dies. Depends on if the tree's in the way. Yeah, this is a tricky spot, just how the tree comes down to the ground. It's hard to get underneath it and locate properly, but I rotated my locator around a couple different times just to help try and hone in on a depth. The planter area where the tree is at, just out from the house to the left of the door, that area is built up a bit higher than the rest of the yard. So I think that's accounting for why the depth is not changing a whole lot. I'm still getting around 6 foot 8 inches deep here. I thought it was going to be a little bit shallower than that, and it still might be that way. It's just hard it's a hard spot to crouch down and locate properly. It's awkward. So use some caution when digging or trying to relocate. As close as that is to the tree there, I don't know that you're going to be able to dig this thing up without killing the tree off. The line goes essentially directly underneath it. And right now, I was mentioning the cast iron, the condition of it, you're getting some wear and tear on the flow line. The wear and tear is worse on the outside, and it's not outrageously bad, but when you couple the condition, the fact that the clay pipe, all the joints are shot, you've got roots, the belly, it's all those things put together why I'm not recommending you just deal with the clay pipe or just parts of it. I recommend taking that repair from the foundation wall all the way to the end of homeowner responsibility, which generally is at the face of the curb. I recommend a rescope afterwards, check the work. But as far as it relates to, is it significant enough to come back into the home and do that? No, not in my opinion. It's not a point where, it'd be good to update all of it if it made sense to, and you had the funds to do it. There's nothing wrong with updating this all at once. In this cast iron, you can also shoot a liner through, but as it sits right now, especially the interior portions of it, still intact, no buildup, relatively smooth pipe bottom, especially considering the age. So that section of pipe there, if the rest of the line does get updated, I always recommend rescoping these older lines about every 2 years or so, just to keep an eye on them and monitor the condition of them. If you don't mind digging things up, it's not as big of a deal to keep an eye on it that way. If you're hoping to do a liner on things, that's where it makes sense, especially to keep an eye on stuff so you can kind of run as much life out of the pipe as possible, but prevent it from getting to a point where you lose the ability to do that or get a good result. Yeah, I recommend I think I've already mentioned it, rescope after the work is done. Whether it's a trenchless style repair or semi-trenchless where you do a pipe burst, whatever. If you do a trench style, if there's any digging involved, you do not want to do the rescope until the line is buried. Otherwise, you're not going to catch any settling problems. The belly and the cast iron, for instance, very easily could have been from bad compaction. And if you were to scope the line before burying it, it would look perfect. It's not until you put weight on the line that you're going to see that stuff. So, what I always tell folks is bury it, compact the ground, especially around the sidewalk area. Basically prep it for concrete to be poured. So there's a load on the line, make sure it looks good, and then do your concrete pour.